Okay. Um, how do you think organizations can prepare leaders at all levels to respond in a crisis? It's amazing everything in this whole text and everything we study, and there's a million classes for it, and then it's always communication. It's like everything, looking through the steps and everything, it's pretty much all communication. Just I don't know. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it does come back to communication. I think a lot of how a company reacts to a crisis is based on like what kind of preparation and plans they have in place ahead of time.
Mhm.
I think, I mean, not necessarily all the time, but most of the time, crises come out of situations that could or should be at least foreseen as possible events. Um, so the companies that have well crafted plans in place, I think, tend to do better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of most, especially larger companies, smaller companies, maybe not so much, but disaster plans, recovery plans, um,
I think the book mentions
installing multiple
Johnson.
redundancies and everything.
The book mentioned Johnson and Johnson and how they had a crisis back in the 80s where 6 people had died, and it turned out they had cyanide on their pills. So they recalled everything immediately and then fixed it and then put it out there, and people trusted them after that because they dealt with it so well.
That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Like for me, because I work for Verizon, so obviously huge company, and we had a little bit of a mini crisis, I would say, yesterday actually, um, where some of our systems were down, and immediately everybody gets on the designated crisis bridge, all the management, and there's this whole well thought out process that's like very well delineated. We're gonna get on this bridge, establish what it is, and then establish a second phone if needed for people to call in with impact. And there was just this very organized flow to how like the troubleshooting and everything kind of went just down the steps. And they actually have a team basically that's what they do is their team. They're basically support crisis situations within Verizon, and it actually flowed pretty well for us yesterday. We were able to get things failed over, come like you're talking about with redundancies and stuff, and we got the backup plans in place quickly to try and get stuff restored as fast as possible.
And that's more how your company does that, because a big part of it is also, the book says, issue selling. So you have to convince everybody above you that it is a crisis and something bad's actually going to happen, rather than just everybody ignore it.
Yeah.
And so it may seem a little bureaucratic and a lot of red tape, but having all that laid out and the forms you fill out and everything else, I'm sure that helps a lot going upwards.
And they get everybody in there together. So you got a whole lot of different business segments that all come together, but it kind of seems chaotic at first, but it very quickly establishes like how big is the scope of what we're talking. Are we talking just one little segment of the business, or is this like huge? And then from there they can break it out as appropriate, the people that are designated to do that as a job.
Well, I think you guys nailed it too a few minutes ago when you said it all boils down to communication and how you're communicating. Because if you wait too long to communicate that something's going on, people think you're hiding something. And then like Jessica was saying, with the other company, people had a lot of faith and trust in people because of how they communicated and what was going on. And if you don't, then you're going to lose the followers. And then you have another crisis within a crisis.
Yeah, and that goes back to everything during the pre-crisis stage and sense making. Sometimes if you underestimate a problem, you try to play it down, and then maybe you don't react as quickly as you should. And then that's where you could run into problems like you just said.
And I work in healthcare, and so I know I used to work at a one of the larger hospital systems here in Phoenix, and so they would do a lot of drills, like code pink drills, for when, I don't know if you guys know what that is, so if you do, I apologize, but it's when a baby gets taken from the nursery or something. So they walk down the whole hospital and everybody gets checked, and so they do drills for that. Or like the emergency management, they have huddles like quarterly, just trying to go through every possible scenario they can think of, just so that we can prepare for it. And where I work now, we had a potential data breach, and in that data breach we had to send out all these letters, and we use a third-party system to help us do that. And the third party ended up, I think somebody over there, they got something off by one line in one of their programs or whatever, and so all of our patients that had been deceased, or that are deceased, the information was off by one line, and so people that were alive or whatever were getting letters saying our deceased patients' families would have gotten. So then there's people like, oh my gosh, if you have me on record as deceased, I'm going to lose my disability insurance and blah, 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 blah. So it was, crisis within a crisis. So it's long story short. Sorry, guys. It's about preparation and communication.
And I think and that's something you get drilled in the military too, right? And it's not, I don't know if you technically qualified as crisis, but some very high stress situations you can get into. And like operationally speaking, like it's just drilled into about just, whatever the steps are, like that's just drilled in that repetition, that when this happens, this is what we'll do. So when you get in that situation, everybody kind of just knows their job and they know their role, and they go in and they're able to execute it. With the hope is that they're able to execute it in a calmer fashion to stay more under control. And
so you don't have to think as much, because thinking takes time, and
exactly,
and then it's stressful and you're confused and it's loud, and
But I think Jessica made a great point when she talked about Johnson and Johnson too, and their quick response and how that, I think that really can benefit companies on the back end. If your company was seen as, trying to get out in front of it, like they were when they immediately recalled the products, then that makes the PR process after the crisis that much easier to do.
Yeah, and that just goes down to the point I was trying to make earlier about that is that goes back to sense making and, even issue selling. Like if at first you analyze it, obviously in Johnson & Johnson's case, I mean, if people are dying and exactly what's causing it, it's kind of hard to downplay it. But if it's something smaller that could compound into something bad, I mean, you have to convince upper management that it really is a crisis. And then also your analysis of it could be wrong. And, you panic and, not even panic, but you get everybody responding, and then the issue kind of gets fixed without all the necessary components. I mean, I'm just arguing why the reaction would be smaller. Not necessarily that the company didn't want to get out ahead of it. They just didn't want to make a media storm out of something that could be small.
I think it also has to do with your culture. Because, like, in America, we're used to answers now. Like, we want answers right away. And then, like, Japan, when Toyota had that crisis a couple years ago, where they had the recalls, and they kind of, like, slowly were talking about it with the media, that was part of their culture. Is the media backs off on them over there. They don't completely, like, hound them and make up stories and stuff like that until they get the truth or whatever.
Yeah, that's definitely a cultural thing, because we live in a culture that, I want to say our culture wants to respect authority, but at the same time not trust them at all. I mean, government, everybody's corrupt in the government, is how Americans think all corporations are out to, that's just kind of part of the culture. So it's hard to, I'm sure, working PR and trying to solve a crisis, it would be difficult to convince the public that you're actually doing the right thing.
Yeah. Every negative event from a corporation or even the government is always like an affirming action to what people already believe, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I told you.
Well,
And not that some of them don't deserve it, but
Of course.
yeah.
Well, and there's such a fine balance between what's too much and not enough to share. And, people are stuck between trusting and not trusting all the time. And how do you do that when you're so far removed from people? Like as a big corporation, when you don't have a personal relationship with all of your stakeholders or whatever, how do you figure out what's best to communicate to everybody that's going to convey the message appropriately?
Definitely difficult. I think the most important part would just be being effective in communication and being making sure what you are saying is being said, even if there's some things that you're not saying. Do you know what I mean? Even if you're not divulging all the information, at least you're being clear.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's just not lost on me, the difficulty. I mean, communication is so complex. It's not just about, saying something. It's how it's heard and how it's understood, how it's received by the recipient.
Oh yeah, and especially nowadays, if the first 20 people who read something on social media react to it negatively, it's pretty much dead.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah, there's just so much. Like, I think business communicating with the public is great through social media. I think that's one of the best things social media does, but it can go bad quick.
Yeah.
No doubt. I guess that goes back with risk taking, though. You wouldn't think just posting on Twitter or something, oh hey, this happened, we're really sorry about it, recall on this product or something, but that could start something quickly, especially on something like Twitter.
Yeah, and I know, because I know the book talked about how there's kind of this increase in crises and stuff like that, and it kind of gets at what you're saying also. I think everything's just so much more connected now that everything is like there's rarely is there the event that's like truly just an isolated incident.
Well, so look, politically, like you have one person claim sexual harassment against a political figure, and then all of a sudden 20, 40, 50 people come out of the woodwork. And, not to discredit these people, because, if any of it's true, it's awfully sad, but you have to wonder too, like how much of it is, and that's with anybody, like how much of it is accurate, or how much are they just trying to ride the wave of whatever's about to happen,
Yeah, and this probably isn't the right attitude, but I have no problem believing anytime anything negative comes out about any of them. It's just like, probably.
Oh no,
that's just me though.
No, and I guess
both
it's
sides.
Example. Yeah, no, it's just an example of how like all it takes is really one person to spark this fire of whatever is happening.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. Something.
Sorry, I keep trying to walk away from my dogs and they keep following me. They're wrestling right under my feet.
Yeah, I think we're about okay on time
Yeah.
now. If there's nothing else anybody wanted to add.
Nope, I think we're good. Thank you guys again. You made the group work pretty pleasurable for online coursework, so thanks.
Yeah, it was pretty easy. Pretty good job, everyone. No problems at all.
All right. Well, best of luck to all of you, and if I see you in another class, great.
Yep. See you guys.
Take care.